So just for some background, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford. I'm one of the organisers of the London CTOs. So I'm not a CTO myself. I run a tech recruitment company called RecWorks. So at RecWorks here, we've been on a bit of a mission for the last 12 years to prove that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people. And that's really primarily around learning and mentoring. So put simply, if people want to learn and people are happy to share, then we're happy to make the connection and put people together. That can be on a group level, like today, or also on a one-to-one level. So several of you I know are members of the Meet and Mentor community, which is one of our biggest examples of what we do. We've made almost 2,500 introductions, one-to-one introductions between mentors and mentees. And we actually have a group within that of aspiring CTOs. So if anybody's happy to get involved with Meet and Mentor, anyone's happy to help out, anyone's happy to be a CTO and sit on a panel to help more juniors, please do let me know afterwards. It's all powered by recruitment, so we don't make any money from anything other than getting people jobs. So if you're looking for any technical staff, then let me know as well. Anyway, on to today. So we have a number of our aspiring CTOs here today. And we also have a number of people that have said they're happy to share their stories, which is really what the whole thing's meant to be about. So please do get involved, ask questions, share your stories. It's really your roundtable to get out of what you want. I do have a bunch of questions here, so if nobody else has questions, then I've got a load prepared. But if anyone's got anything specific, jump in. So today's discussion is about the difference between working as a CTO in a small company or a startup versus working in a larger company. So I will say, if I can ask everyone to mute their microphones, I think everyone has, yeah, perfect. The best way we've found of running these roundtables is just using the mute button. So if you want to talk, then just unmute. I'll keep an eye on who's unmuted and I'll bring you in at that point. So I'll lead on to our first question then. So working at a startup versus working at a large established company. I'd love to hear from anybody that's got experience of both here. But of course, it's okay if you've had experience of either, because for anybody looking to get in, yeah, they're trying to find out from both sides of the fence. So first things first, what does the day-to-day look like, and how does that compare between a startup and a large company?
Hi, Alvaro Moya here.
Go ahead.
From my experience of starting from solopreneur to go into bigger companies and doing all the journey, you also have different kind of CTOs. Everyone has their role CTO, but at the end, it's really different. I would say that at the beginning, you are more like a CPO with some coding skills, or at least what is required from a team where only there is like one founder, more like business-oriented founder. They need, you need as a CTO to define the product, to define the architecture of the product. You define the code because you don't have employees yet, or you have one or two. So you are still hands-on coding. You are kind of comfortable preparing hacks, preparing prototypes or mocks. So helping also from the product side, if the company cannot afford. So I think this is mainly the difference. When you are in a bigger company, it's much different. It's more related to team management and delivering the vision through your team. So the change is really, really great. It's another kind of role, definitely, like 100%.
Great, thanks very much, Alvaro. Anybody with any contrasting opinions at all? Ken?
Yeah, not a contrasting one. I think I'd certainly echo that. I think an interesting one is for people to recognise what constitutes a bigger company as well. So the difference between a startup and a bigger company isn't a startup and a corporate. I've spent a lot of my career in scaling up businesses that have come out of that startup phase, and they may have 30 employees. There may be a tech team to start with of 5 or 6 people, but they don't want someone to come in and be a technical architect. They want someone to come in and map out the journey from being a startup into being 100+ people. So I think that difference between a startup and a bigger company the gap between when a CTO, I think, needs to step in and be a lot more strategic, a lot more kind of operational around the business and less hands-on, isn't that far up that chain from being a startup.
Interesting. And have you stuck around then in that position once you've gone from 30 to 100, Ken? Have you been around long enough to see the changes in the sort of the day-to-day?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a CTO and been a technical decision maker to extent of architecture. In fact, I've always kind of thought there's actually quite a nice separation between being a CTO is a part of the responsibility, with teams that once you've got a relatively small tech team, maybe 5 or 6 people, but the aspiration is you might want to take that to 20, 30, 50 people, you have to step away from being the technical architect because there is just too much else to do on the operational side of the business, around people, around all the different building blocks that you are now going to take responsibility for. So I've seen everything from going into a business with maybe tech teams of 5 and then growing that to maybe tech teams of probably 40, 50, but then that also started to involve bringing in offshore because you're trying to scale up very quickly and trying to use kind of a mixed model. And I've worked in other organizations where they were very acquisition based. So they grew very quickly by going and acquiring a business of 100 people. And then your role as CTO is very, very, very different because there's no way on this planet you can keep on top of the technology. You have to build a team of technology experts around you to do that, because while you're building that, the business are going off and looking for the next business they want to go and acquire. So very different approach when you get to that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ken. Lee, I've seen you've unmuted there. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think, I mean, to Ken's point, there's only so much you can do in growing organizations, but I think I see more CTOs moving into the other direction where, Ken was talking about the huge kind of operations focus, where CTOs in growing companies or bigger companies tend to be more the ones that are very much focused on technical strategy and technology and architecture, and often look at 3-5 year type of technology kind of changes for the organization, and usually then try to hand over the operational day-to-day management to a head of engineering or VP engineering type person. I guess where it becomes challenging for me is when, I've been speaking to a few companies for like a CTO type role, and it's when the company has an existing CTO or usually more like a tech lead stroke lead developer who's been rapidly promoted or something like that, and that person isn't growing with the business. So the company has a problem that they would like to replace the person, but of course there's always that sensitivity of, well, he kind of has the CTO job, so what do we do with that person? Then do we change that to a chief architect role or something like that? And I think it's those transitions that are often very difficult. I think most companies are quite clear on what they need during particular stages, but struggle with transitioning employees that aren't necessarily the right fit for the next stage of that company. And quite often earlier stage CTOs are not necessarily the best people for managing larger teams and the operations of that.
Yes, Chris.
Hey guys. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting point where it's nowadays common knowledge that when you're starting up a startup, you essentially need a tech lead. You don't necessarily, it's not the same skills in terms of management and managing a large organization. However, based on my experience as a serial founder and all the learnings from thousands and thousands of failures of startups, when I was a co-founding member of Lexu, is a legal startup. As a CTO, I was doing anything but tech leadership. I was doing marketing, customer development. And I think it's the right way. So the most important thing you do in early stages is actually building the product, and everyone is building a product. That's what a startup is. It's a project to build a new product. So there is this contradiction in a way where on one side, oh, you don't really need a proper CTO. On the other side, if you want your venture to be a success, it has to be on the right path. So ideally, you want a technical co-founder who is really strategic. And actually, you could potentially, you don't even need to code. I mean, you could potentially outsource. I have so many tech shops these days, so many development companies that can help you with your MVP. So this is a little bit my kind of experience and contradictions as well. I can see a lot of people say, well, they're right. You know, we're not going to have a technical founder, but then they end up on a strategic level not doing the right thing, and they fail as a business. It's not about building the tech, because yeah, of course you can outsource a tech team easily. Now, some people are going to say, well, outsourcing a team, that's going to cause you failure. But I personally don't agree. I think it's all about business strategy and product.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Controversial.
And thanks, Lee. Appreciate that. Gaurad, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference between like small teams and my largest team is about 300 developers, and I oversee 5 teams. So it's a kind of a different scale from startups. But I have worked in startups. I've worked in kind of all the individual companies in between. You kind of wear many hats, I think, when you're in a startup. And as organizations get bigger, then you specialize a lot more. So kind of those, and there's no one way of being a tech lead, I think. I mean, you could be product focused, you could be team focused, you could be process focused, technology focused. The larger the organization gets, though, the more that you have to, I think advocacy becomes the key skill, the politics, the selling between the different departments. Whereas, in a small team, you don't have to do a lot of that.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Okay, it's interesting. The responses are going all over the place in terms of the different questions I've got written down, and we've collected from people that signed up here. So again, if anybody's got any specific questions, either unmute or by all means drop them in the chat as well, and I can put those in. Andre, did you have something you wanted to add there as well?
Yeah, I just want to focus on a specific aspect. Myself, I did a CTO role in a small startup, 15 people probably. Total now I'm involved. I came to a scale up 2 years back. We scaled engineering team, like tripled, I think, engineering team since I joined. In very short, like in less than 1 year, as we got a huge, large customer. And the differences, apart from what has been mentioned already, obviously you cannot be hands-on anymore, and you specialize more. As you scale, you need to have tech leads in place. Otherwise, like always, when you grow, sometimes you don't hire a right individual. Sometimes they're organizationally stretched, and obviously it's a heavy workload for yourself in that place. So you need to fill in the gaps. However, as organizations grow, and in a big organization, sure, maybe it's specific for our organization, I was spending a lot of time managing stakeholders, executives, trying to align organization. So I'm not sure if other folks have similar experiences. Would be good to know how you tackle that specific problem.
Anybody want to come back to Andre on that?
Do you mean the question of how are you going to, once you're in the role, how do you align all your different stakeholders to a business strategy or to a technology strategy, or a bit of both?
I think it's both. It might be reflective of absence of clear business strategy. Maybe it's something else.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time spent discussing with the senior stakeholders from sales, from strategy, from CEO, even like board meetings really take like 50% of time of that role. It's easier.
I think some of your skills have to start to step outside of being kind of a CTO and just being a C something or other. A lot of the businesses that I've gone into scale ups they've had a CEO, they've had an FD, they've had a COO, but it doesn't mean they've got a coherent business strategy. And I think part of your role is not just to develop the technology strategy that aligns with the business strategy, but part of your role being a C-level is if the business doesn't have a coherent business strategy, you're responsible as part of that board to build one and holding your peers to account for building one. And that's where I think that when you first join a board, you kind of have to learn there needs to be a good, healthy tension that you can't just go away and build a technology strategy that looks pretty if the business doesn't know where it's going. And I think when you're in that scale-up piece, that's critical, because otherwise, I think I've seen you'll often have a sales director that will just go hell for leather and sell anything that's in front of him. You'll have an FD that's just concerned about not going bust, and there isn't that coherent vision of, well, where are we going to be in 5 years' time? And more to the point, why are we going there? Are we going for an exit? Are we going for more investment? Because that will govern very much kind of what all the different components you've got to build as part of your technology strategy. So I think you've got to elevate yourself and be part of a board and hold the rest of your board to account if you don't have a business strategy, and be open about it.
Makes sense. Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Lee, did you want to jump in again?
Yeah, I think where isn't that phase with companies that where nobody really kind of knows what they're doing. It's like I think when companies are 5, 10, 20 people, it's you're all, as some people said earlier, you're all doing everything in order to get your product validation, market validation, those type of things, and it's of course everyone is still figuring things out, but it's relatively clear what needs to be done. And once you're like an established organization, that's also fine. But it's a bit in the middle where I sometimes struggle with companies where I think that the management team or the existing management team is often still thinking like a 20 people startup, and then they're trying to hire maybe a new CTO or VP engineering type person, and then put all the demands of you need to be super, super technical, like a 10, 15 people startup, but you also need to have all the experience of growing and leading large teams. And I think that's sometimes where I guess people in this group sometimes struggle with organizations who are not entirely sure where they are yet and haven't grown yet, and then are trying to hire someone for the current state whilst they should actually focus on the future state. And a lot of companies haven't really figured that out properly, I found.
Great, thanks, Lee, and thanks everyone for the answer there. Ken, did you want to jump in again?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree with that. I think a lot of companies haven't figured it out, and a lot of scale-up businesses I've been into haven't figured it out. But I think if you go in with the experience of having done it, you can point out very quickly that they are going to hit a ceiling. They will hit a problem where they just can't scale quick enough because of what they're building. And I think all of the scale-ups I've been into at some point have either hit a ceiling or they've been just about to hit one. And I think if you can help plot their way through that with your experience, you can go in very early on and point all those things out, even to your leadership team, to your C-level team. If they don't want to listen to that and they just want to carry on blindly, then you might be in the wrong organization, or roll up your sleeves and just get on with that battle. But ultimately, eventually they will run into they will hit ceiling, and that's classic in literature of scaling companies, that they will hit ceiling and have to do a slightly different direction in order to predict where they're going in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's probably it's probably a good way to weed out the companies you don't want to work for, because I mean, I think we've all been in situations where you have conversations with an organization that is in that scale-up phase, and then they start asking you questions or rejecting you because, well, you didn't really know the details of that React kind of framework we use. And it's like, so all the problems you talk to me about are all about organization and communication and people, and then you're like obsessed about that. I don't have that particular Python library or that React experience, and I guess that's what I meant earlier with the mindset is often that early stage, and I think maybe it is a way to weed out the good roles from the bad ones. Can you maybe, yeah?
Yeah, I think you also, in that early stage, I think you can also play a role in educating them as to what that role actually is, because I think a lot of startups won't really have had experience of it. I've worked with 2 founders in the past. One was a very sales-driven guy. The other one was just a complete techie who was absolutely talented. But between the 2 of them, the sales guy wanted to build stuff and the techie stuff was happy to build it. They didn't really know. They knew they needed somebody in a leadership role. They didn't really know what that role should be. So actually part of my job going in early and part of the interview process was actually to educate them in, well, this is what I think a CTO needs to do for your business. So yeah, I think you're right. If they're taking you down a very, very technical route, the chances are they haven't quite clocked maybe where they're going yet, but I think you can still educate them. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It just means they're not quite sure yet where they're going, and you can help them with that. And I think that's a great selling point for you, is that you can help them with that journey.
Great, thanks guys. Adam, I know you've been off mute for a while there. Did you want to jump in here?
So just wanted to pick up on something that Ken said a couple of minutes ago, and I'll probably misphrase it. I'm sorry, Ken, you'll have to help me with what you actually said. But it felt like you were slightly brushing off and making it sound very easy. The process of just, sorry by way for my very bright white reflection, brushing off how easy it is to either bring a C-suite along with you or to just reject them and move on. And I found that in my experience, when you get to, I don't know, about 50 plus people in the company, and you're heading up towards 100, that's when this becomes basically almost, sometimes I feel it becomes your entire job is to re-educate the C-suite and drag them along with you on that journey. And you only touched on it briefly, but you kind of said, you made it sound, or it sounded to me like you were saying, yeah, look, either they come along with you or go and find somewhere else to work. But that felt a bit disingenuous, and I kind of get the impression that isn't what you meant, and I was misunderstanding it. I said it kind of seems to be where that's where most of my job ends up being at that point. No,
I completely agree. I didn't mean to belittle that at all. It can be really, really difficult, and it's part of. I think that will kind of go back to you as what kind of role people want as individuals. You know, I like working at a board level. I kind of like that healthy tension, but I completely agree. It can be, especially in those early or storming and forming bit, it can be the majority of your role is just working and trying to get a direction with the business, and that can take months to do. So no, I'm certainly not saying, do it or move on. I think your point's a really good one. Go into it with your eyes open that you may have a very difficult journey, storming away with your new leadership team, your new C-level team, to get to where you want to. So yeah, completely agree. It's not a trivial task by any means.
I think it depends a bit on whether you're a consulting CTO or you are looking to join them permanently. And I think so. One of the great experiences I've had is, I mean, I guess some of you are a member of the London Bartech CTO community. Several people there have those fractional CTO roles that are advising often those startups in that transition period, and they have done a lot of that legwork for you. So when you then come in as a permanent CTO, that kind of change management has already taken place. Quite often when that company hasn't had the luxury of a fractional CTO or advisory, and you come in as a new permanent CTO or VP engineering, whatever kind of role you're joining into, it's really hard to achieve that in a bunch of interviews, and because often because you're kind of sometimes disagreeing with some fundamental strategic thinking of the leadership team, and which isn't always appreciated during those conversations by those companies. So yeah, it depends on the situation, I guess.
Great, thanks all. Greg, one thing I'd like to come back to you, if that's okay. You mentioned one of the teams you were you were managing there was, did you say 300 people? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, if you include it's about 200, and then the extra 100 are outsourcers. It's distributed kind of across the world. So.
Okay, so as somebody that's gone from a startup to managing, these huge teams, what would you say is the difference of skill set? What skills do people need to focus on building if they do aspire to progress to that kind of level? Where would you focus?
I don't know. So from my point of view, it kind of really depends. Like what you do in a startup is completely it doesn't compare to the role that I do. I am quite technical. I do quite make technical decisions. I help guide the architecture. I'm definitely not the best person to make technical decisions on everything, but the key skill that I have is ability to kind of dive deeply into the tech and make sure that the right people's voices are heard, and that we can discuss those things and we can move forward in the right direction. I guess, like, so from my point of view, there's kind of 5 kind of key competencies, you know what I mean? 5 key skills that you kind of need. Like, there's the tech, obviously. There's process, so project management, team building, and career management, kind of people focused stuff. Product, I think, is quite relevant for startups. And as I mentioned before, advocacy, I think, which is kind of a key skill around kind of selling, and kind of working between different groups. So when you go from a small team of 5, it's very easy to be like, very, communication happens, it's all very easy. Like, you don't really have to, management kind of takes care of itself. As you move up, then you kind of focus on more of the project management side of things. So in my case, in my particular field, we have people who are specialized in the product area that I can't possibly compete with. So it would be useless for me to try. Well, I mean, I have an opinion obviously on the product, but I'm not an expert. We have project managers, dedicated project managers. So even though I stepped in and filled the project management role for a lot of the projects, allowing other people to take that over has kind of freed me up to add value to the company, which is largely on the technical side and the collaboration side, bringing diverse groups of people together to make the technical governance aspects of it. But sorry, to go, not to labour the point, I would say that it really depends. It depends on what skills to focus on. It really depends on you as a person. It's like, you're not going to be strong in all of those. And it really depends on the nature of the business you're in, because my particular field is very different from everyone else's, I imagine. The kind of business you are, and who your team is around you. Like, the fact that I can step away from the project management stuff because I have strong project managers around me frees me up to do the technical stuff. I would step in and fill that project management role if the project managers weren't as strong. So
I think that's a very so I just checking out your LinkedIn. I left the games industry about 9-10 years ago, but I think a lot of what you're saying is very. I used to work for NC Soft.
Right.
I did a spell at Codemasters, but everyone has to suffer.
Everyone has at some point, right?
But I think a lot of what you're saying is a reflection of the games industry, that especially the bigger games and the AAA studios learned a long time ago to respect technical skills and to make technical career track a first-class citizen way before the mainstream IT industry did. And my experience, especially of tech directors being allowed to make huge amounts of money and focus on tech, and in the biggest companies do stuff that's worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to the company, where in a traditional, any normal startup or VC-backed company, you would never be allowed to focus that much on tech. And the closest you'd get would be a chief innovation officer or a chief research officer, which is when they've decided to sideline the CTO, because the CTO has proven that they just don't care about the business and they don't care about the product and so on. And certainly my experience in the game industry is it wasn't that people didn't care about it. It was just that it was a much more specialized set of skill sets. And the companies were much better at rewarding people and letting them do that. So I think,
I think though that there are people who go up kind of the. So I used to work for Microsoft as well, and Microsoft had definitely had like the individual contributor track, which was if you were a programmer and you could get, you know, advance as high as you like in that, as well as the managerial track. And I think that's the same with games. It's like sometimes you get people who are good with people and then do that kind of role. So there are, I think you like. I agree with you. Like, I'm allowed to be technical, and it's something I'm good at, and that's why I do the job that I do. I wouldn't necessarily do a VC-backed startup, I would have thought.
Okay, great, thanks. Did anybody else with any experience of large companies or managing teams or teams of teams want to weigh in at all around this, the skills required and how it changes, you know, in you know, things you could potentially work on?
So
early?
I think I would, my recurring advice to people asking this kind of question is along the same lines as I think, as well as a lot of what Gwarad was saying and a bit of what Ken was saying, but is what kind of CTO are you going to be? And certainly I would lay money on the fact that today, if you're in London and you're a CTO and you want to be in a fast growth business, you have to be this thing that people are some calling a CPTO. You have to be the head of all product and all technology. And if you're not, leave, because you're going to get kicked out if that company keeps growing fast. If you do want to be that kind of CTO, it kind of is spelled out for you. You're going to have to understand product, you're going to have to understand technology, you're going to have to understand sales, you're going to have to understand revenue, you're going to have to understand how all those things fit together, and you have to become really good at explaining it to non-technical people and even to non-sales people, because you're the one who's going to have to stitch together delivery whilst innovating, yet making the thing that can be sold. But if you don't want to be in that fast growth VC-backed thing, then I think you get a lot more options about specializing and going tech heavy or management heavy or whichever thing you want to do.
So I'm just curious, actually, in that environment. So I have a brand team that have special, like, experts in the field. They do the market research. They talk to customers. There's in that kind of environment, you're saying that all the thing that I have a dedicated team of, you know, 20 people to do, falls on one person, as well as the tech.
So I'll underline that I said fast growth VC backed. A big defining feature of that is that you're trying to create a product where none has existed before. So nobody quite knows exactly what the product should be or how it should work. And that's the same when you're 2 people in a back bedroom or 200 people and you've had vast amounts of money and you're trying to get towards an IPO. It changes slightly, but it's still fundamentally you're trying to create a market that didn't exist before. So in order to keep tabs on that innovation and to keep moving that quickly and reacting that quickly, there is a lot more cross integration. I would say one of my experiences coming from the games industry, it was like we were permanently on the vertical slice iterative loop of try a new version of the whole thing, see what happens, decide that we were wrong in 8 different places, and then in the early days it's redesign the software, but in the late days it's rebuild the organization, downsize and upsize different teams, different departments, because we realized that actually the market we were selling into 2 years ago, we've hit saturation and now we need to find a bigger market. And I went around interviewing a whole load of CTOs in much larger companies a few years ago. And one of the things that surprised me was that they all reported things like, I have my own sales team. as a CTO and my own marketing team. They're really small and they only do early stage product marketing. So in terms of scale, this is people with multiple hundreds headcount just on the engineering side of the business, up to 1,000 or more. And they were reporting, yeah, look, I need to have a sales team who can generate new products and get sales to $1 million a year in revenue, because at less than $1 million a year, the sales director does not care and does not have time to care. But if I get it to $1 million a year, they start to be interested. And then my sales team, who are specialized in prototype sales and early adopter sales and high risk sales, hand it over to the real sales division of the company, who understands enterprise sales and long-term contracts and long-term support and so on, and who tries to then turn it into a $10 million, $100 million a year business. So when I say that these things will become your responsibility, yes, but in parallel, and certainly the bigger you get, the more there also exists a whole division somewhere that specializes in it. But whilst you're still doing the fast growth stuff, you can't let go of that. You still have to have someone doing this early stage innovation stuff and converting it through. You can't just do it and then drop it. You've got to do it, wrap it up, package it, test it in the market, improve it, sell it, upgrade it, and keep on going until you've got it to the stage where it's got enough momentum it can be taken on by the rest of the company.
Great, thanks for that, guys. One more question I'm going to squeeze in. We're going to go to breakout rooms in about 5 minutes, or when this question is answered at least. So and if anyone else has got any other questions before we do that, then obviously just pop them in the chat there. But one question that came up from somebody that joined was, when does it make sense to split a VP of engineering and CTO roles? And I know we've kind of hovered around these kind of things, but has anyone got any thoughts on any time to make that distinction?
I would say it really depends on what you view the CTO role and the VP of engineering. Like, I've never come across two definitions that kind of match. But normally, so some companies, I've seen the CTO being the technical person and VP of engineering being the people person. It doesn't necessarily have to be. See, another company that I was involved, I didn't work for, but I worked with, their CTO was a business person, product person. Wasn't very technical at all. But they had a VP of engineering who was a proper engineer who understood project management. So I don't know. It's I have never seen two people do it alike.
Yeah, we see a lot of that. I think everyone has a slightly different perspective on the CTO, of what the CTO does, and I think we've had on one of these roundtables before, two people that completely disagreed with the CTO versus VP of engineering. So it does seem to be subjective. Has anyone any experience on this, or seen it working well?
I'd reiterate your two people disagreeing completely. What I've seen over the last 5 or 6 years is basically two completely opposing views becoming the paired majority. Like 80%, 90% of them are covered by one of these two different things. And one is the kind of, the VP of engineering is our person who's organized and good at project management and people management and organizational stuff, because our CTO is too airy-fairy to do any of that. And the other one is, I'm probably mischaracterizing one or both of these, but as a gross simplification, the other one is our VP of engineering is the guy who still wants to do some kind of code stroke innovation in tech, whereas the CTO has decided that actually they're much more interested in the business and sales side. And those are just utterly in conflict. You couldn't rationalize those two other than, I think, to just say, you look at your CTO, you see what your CTO is doing at board level, that's adding value as far as the C-suite are concerned. And then you say, okay, everything that's not that, but requires someone almost as senior, almost as skilled and experienced as a CTO, that's the VP of engineering. They tend to be seen to be brought in as a kind of extra pair of hands for someone that the C-suite basically needs to become more specialized on the single most important thing that they're doing for the C-suite. And I put it that way because often it's not the most important thing as far as the engineering function is concerned. which also makes sense of why you call it a VP of engineering. It's the person that the engineers or the developers all understand as their leader, while they don't necessarily really understand what the CTO is doing, because the CTO is often answerable to completely different parts of the company. I think that's also the rule of thumb of when you need it. If you feel that your CTO is being pulled in too many directions at the C level, that's a good time to start looking at it.
Brilliant. Okay, so when the CTO is being pulled in too many directions, I think most people are going to say that on day one.
At the C level.
At the C level.
If you ignore everything else in the company.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Anybody else with any experience of seeing this distinction, or any thoughts on that before we go to the breakout rooms? No. Okay, cool. Okay, brilliant. All right. Well, then thank you for everyone, to everyone for getting involved, everyone who asked a question, answered the question, or came to spectate. If anybody, like I said to you before, reiterate that again, if anybody's happy to sit in on any of our mentoring roundtables, we have a bunch of people that are keen to become a CTO at some point in the next 1 to 3 years. Some as kind of as junior as an engineer level, but mainly at the kind of the tech lead or development manager. If anybody's happy to come to one of our events, we do these small breakout room style events where you'll sit in a room with 3 or 4 people, all unrecorded, and just literally answer the questions of a bunch of different people. So let me know if you'd be happy with that. Okay, I'm going to press the breakout room button now. So again, if you've got to drop off, that's absolutely fine. If you want to stay on, then you should have a button there that will just say join. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon.